Drew Taylor, and welcome into another edition of Valpo SportsNite. On today's show, we'll discuss the resignation of Coach Keith Freeman, March Madness, as well as Roger Goodell's punishment to the Saints. Joining me today is Mike Targonski, General Manager at WVUR, and Matt Barnard, Business Director at WVUR. Guys, first things first, let's talk about the men's basketball team. After a first-round loss to Miami in the NIT, do you consider this a successful season?
First, let's talk about that NIT game for a little bit, because you saw a real gutted-out effort from Valpo, of course, playing with a few different injuries and some illness. And a six-man rotation from Valpo came a little close to beating the Hurricanes, a team that went 9-7 in the ACC. So you just wonder, they kind of ran out of gasoline, only using Richie Edwards off the bench. If you could imagine all the effort that they put in against Detroit, how far they would have gotten against Miami. And I think it's indicative of their season in that good effort. Pretty good year for the Crusaders. Right. Had a lot of question marks coming into the season in terms of, how high was the ceiling, and I think we saw how high the ceiling was.
I think definitely consider it a success. Going into the year, you had a first-year head coach. You're tabbed fifth. You're in a Horizon League full of a bunch of talent. Butler coming off 2 straight national titles. Cleveland State has always been a favorite in this league for a long time. You had Milwaukee coming off of the regular season title a year ago. So they were up against a lot. And early on, trying to figure out rotations and who was going to play where, who was going to start. You had transfers that had immediate eligibility, which you don't really have that often, trying to fit them into a role that they're going to be starting on a team right away. You had Ben Boggs come in late into the season and trying to get him into rotation and fit him in too in a couple of tournaments early on. So it was a tough test early on. And I think that really is why, going down the stretch, you look at them and saying they won this Horizon League title because of the early competition they had, and moving into the late part of the season, they were just so strong because they were able to get everybody in and figure out their way. And Bryce Drew did a great job putting everyone together, a brand new coaching staff, putting everything into a season, like I said, tabbed fifth. And Youngstown State came out of nowhere. Right. There are teams that you're not going to guarantee a win anywhere in the Horizon League, even if Loyola's 1 and whatever. Right. You're not going to guarantee a win anywhere.
They certainly accomplished a lot, but moving forward, what's the next step for the Crusaders? I mean, they basically worked with an 8-man rotation this year. Do you see that a little bit more depth next year? Does Bryce Drew go out and recruit a couple of guys? What's the next step to not only win the regular season title, but win a conference championship tournament and then go to the big dance?
Well, they already have 2 verbal commitments at the guard position, which I think late in the season was where you saw a lot of the struggling. Yep. Their three-point shooting went down, especially in that Detroit game, and really bad in that NIT game.
You're absolutely right.
Getting a couple more guards and building on that. Sure. You have Bobby Capobianco and Vashil Fernandez that are going to get their eligibility and come in and play. Those are 2 big guys that you're going to have to be able to play down low, where Ryan Brokoff has been playing a 4. Maybe he could play a 3 now, too, and give him some more space, let him play some more basketball. And I was talking to you earlier, Drew. When was the last time they had a big guy that could take one step and throw it down? For Shields coming in with a lot of height, a lot of raw athletic ability, but they're going to find that way throughout the summer and move it in next year. I think there's a big ceiling again for them next year.
And I think this season, with these guys on this team, with so much or so little turnover heading into the next season, they're really gelling together as a team. There's lots of chemistry. They talk about their family, and that bodes well when you have a team that's able to be cohesive like that, and it's not just guys looking to play somewhere and then go transfer to another school or try out for the NBA or something like that. These guys are committed to this school right here, right now, and heading into next season, it can only go stronger from there. Bryce will be in his 2nd year. He'll be able to sit down and, like Mike said, it's going to be a big summer as well as a big season for Valpo basketball. But this summer, they're going to get a lot of work done in the office and on the hardwood, and they're going to be coming out swinging once fall hits next year.
I think that Coach Powell is another big influence for him. And when I had opportunity to talk to Bryce when I write for the team for the Torch, he talked about how Powell helps them in the spiritual life, but also on the basketball floor, and having that other mind come in. Yep. I think that this coaching staff, very young, very enthusiastic, very hardworking, and that's the other thing that relate to the players. Very hardworking coaching staff, and I think that's a byproduct of what we saw on the court this year. Is the coaching staff puts in the work, and they translate it to the players, and the players bought in, and a very successful season from the start. And this is coming from a program that 3 years ago was 9-22.
Right.
And then they won 15 games, and they won 23 games, and then we got to where we're at. So
I personally think it was a successful season, especially in Bryce Drew's first year. Lost 3 of his top 4 scorers from last year. There were a lot of question marks, as you mentioned earlier, Matt, about this team. And Bryce Drew, to me, exceeded all expectations with the guys that he had transfer in and the guys that were already existing on this team.
There was a lot of publicity for the school too.
Yeah.
So they're on the map. They're back on the map. And, Comcast Chicago, ESPN3, ESPNU, ESPN. A lot of publicity for the school too. So the program, I think, is headed in a great direction right now.
Sticking with basketball, guys, now let's talk about head women's basketball coach Keith Freeman. He announced his resignation this week after 18 years on the Valpo bench. Was this the right time for a change, and what's the future of the women's program?
I think it was the right time for a change just based on the struggles the last couple of years. I mean, they're only a couple years away from being a contender at the top of the Horizon, or a couple years off of being a contender for the top of the Horizon League title. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show about all the losses. You can't blame him for all the stuff that went on too. All the injuries, a lot of people didn't want to play, transfers, eligibility rules and stuff. So it was a very interesting year for him, and they battled through a lot of adversity. And I tell you what, he had this team playing very well at the end of the season.
He did.
They won a lot of big games. They almost had a chance to host a first-round game. They ended as a 9 seed, which to host you have to be in the top. You have to be top 5, 6, 7, and they had opportunity to do that. He had them playing really well. So it's an interesting time. I could see why, just because of the adversity they had to battle. The future of the program, I mean that's very difficult to talk about right now because Coach Kirby retired, who's been his assistant for the last 6 or 7 years. The 2 coaches that just came in have only been here for 2 years and 1 year. That's Coach Helm and Camara, respectively. So the program, it's tough to tell where they're going.
It's unfortunate considering that it's a what have you done for me lately type of atmosphere now in college basketball. I mean, nobody really cares what he did 12 years ago with this basketball team. They care what he's done in the last 3-4 years in the Horizon League, and frankly, he didn't adapt to the Horizon League. He was more of a mid-con coach.
Yeah, and just the 2 things I wanted to say is, of course, one you guys touched on is don't forget about the effort that the women's basketball team put in this season. Not only throughout the whole year, dealing with, like you said, all the adversity they had it drawn up pretty well at the start of the year, and then things just did not work out for them. And whose fault exactly is, you can't really put that on one person or one situation. And also, coming down the stretch, we were all on spring break, and we were more focused on the basketball team, but the women's team, they were battling very hard, and they made an incredible run, and all the players, and they deserve the highest marks for that. As far as the future goes, you look at, since we have switched over to the Horizon League and the coaching changes that we have made, all of them have turned out to be excellent choices. Tracy Woodson, Dale Carlson, Mike Avery, and the list goes up. Bryce Drew this year, of course. They're going to go out and they're going to get
Coach Stevens with softball.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, and it goes on. They're going to go out and get a coach that can fit this league, and they are going to. Women's basketball in the next few years is going to be just another, brick in the wall of these Valpo athletic teams that are making great strides within the Horizon League.
What type of coach do they need? Somebody young and athletic that can maybe relate to the players more than Coach Freeman did? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where the gap was because the talent, to me, was there. It just wasn't put together.
You're going to have to get a lot of players. You're going to have to be very young. I think you're going to have to get a young coach, and that's kind of the trend in basketball. And the team won their first Horizon League postseason game. Nobody really has talked about that. They went in and they beat Milwaukee. They had a franchise low, or program low, of points scored in a game against Milwaukee. In Milwaukee earlier this year, they went there and they beat them. So that's a big mark for them moving forward. They're losing one of the program's best players in Varner, but they got a lot coming back that I think they should be excited about. They got to look for youth though, because they got to have more than 7 players.
I agree. Let's switch gears now to the VU baseball team. They've cooled off a little bit since their hot start early on in the season. They've hit Horizon League play. Where do you see them finishing when it's all said and done?
I think the baseball team, just to touch on what happened since we left, last year they went on their West Coast swing, and they had to deal with some tough scheduling, some tough opponents. And, they kind of had to lick their wounds about that. It served well for them as the season went on. This year, they did have some good success at the start, and with their traveling, it's always good to get at bats against, tougher competition coming back now, heading into conference play. I think things are going to work out very well for the baseball team. They've made some great additions, like Tanner Vavra. He's the time that I last looked up, leading the team in batting average. Coming through, making great strides. Tyler Deachin and Kevin Wild, kind of the senior leaders at the top of the rotation. Things are going to be, I think, very good for this Valpo baseball team.
They struggled mightily on that road trip last year, and they did a little bit at the end this year too. But Last year, I think they came back maybe like 1-14 or something like that. Like, it was really bad. And they ended up making some noise in the Horizon League. And I think you could expect the same thing from them. Coach Woodson has those guys working their tails off from the start, from the fall season coming in. So they're going to get into a little bit of a groove now. They're going to be home. They've been, sleeping in odd hotel beds and bus trips and stuff. Be home the next 2 weekends with Horizon League play. Going to play a few games Monday and Tuesday, get the rhythm back before they get into the Horizon League weekend. And I think the schedule actually favors Valpo playing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday instead of Friday and then doubleheader Saturday. They get these guys and figure out their lineups and everything like that. And the rotation, I think, is kind of set from here, moving forward with Deachin, and you said Wild, Wormington's in there too, and getting those guys going. So I think that you kind of expect the same thing from the baseball team.
I think rotation to me is the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, they really need to go deep into these ball games because I think the offense is fine. You mentioned Tanner Vavra. He's been solid at the top of that lineup, but I think the rotation, couple of question marks. If they can get into the back end of the Valpo bullpen, then they'll be fine. But to me,
they need that. Yeah, they need that. They either need the bridge or they need the endurance there to get through those starts. Kevin Upp last year did a good job in some non-conference games, some smaller games, and you look forward to see him once we get into conference play take those starts further and make the similar kind of big starts against conference opponents. Hopefully it works out for him, but I definitely agree that starting pitching is going to set the tone for him, and I think Coach Woodson has him set up well. Of course, pitching coach Brian Schmack as well. They've been working hard all year, and they definitely want to make some strides within the league this season.
We're up against a break, but when we come back, we'll talk about the NCAA tournament as well as Peyton Manning landing in Denver. You're watching Valpo Sports Night. Stay tuned.
Hi everybody, I'm Dick Vitale of ESPN, and I'm on VUTV. It's awesome, baby, with a capital A.
I'm Connor Lott, and I'm on VUTV.
I'm Nick Lindicky, and I'm on VUTV.
I'm President Heckler, and I'm on VUTV.
I'm Jeff Lang, General Manager of WVUR, and I'm on VUTV.
We're the Career Center, and we're on VUTV.
Welcome back into Valpo Sports Night. Now some national topics. Again, Mike Targonski, General Manager, WVUR, and Matt Barnard, Business Director, WVUR. With a few big upsets along the way, the NCAA tournament field is trimmed to 16 teams. Who is in your Final Four, and who's going to hoist the trophy in New Orleans?
Who was or who's going to be in my Final Four?
Well, I don't care about your brackets. I want it now. I mean, throw your brackets out the window.
Well, I'll talk about brackets for a second because day one I was 16 out of 16.
Right.
Day two I won like 4. So the upsets have been throwing off the whole story all year. Ohio too, all the big noise coming out of that state. So going into the Final Four, I think Kentucky is the strongest team, and I think I had Syracuse for a while as the #1 team just because they had the #1 ranking. But without Fab Melo, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think Ohio State now gets the edge up in that region. Michigan State, just one of the strongest teams in the nation, and they have been all year. And it's very tough to go against Izzo. I did in my bracket. I went with Mizzou, but a 15 seed showed me how much I knew. And I think Kansas coming out of the bottom bracket. I really do. I think that they're playing very strong, very good team basketball throughout the first couple games of the tournament. They had a bit of a scare. It was against Purdue, I believe, and I think that moving forward, I think Kansas has one of the stronger teams remaining. I think they can come out of that bottom region and maybe make a run at the Final Four.
Well, I had Mizzou playing FSU in the championship game with FSU taking the title home.
Sure.
So
I had Mizzou winning.
While I'm still in first place in my pool for points, I have the least amount of points remaining available. So I did very well early on, and I'll see you later. But as for who's in still now, I really think Michigan State has the gears in the engine to take this thing all the way. Draymond Green, Brandon Wood making some big noise as they've got into the tournament play, and of course Coach Izzo. You cannot back that. You cannot stop that. Marquette's still in there. Marquette's still hanging around. That's going to be a good one. And look out for Louisville too, because Louisville, they're deadly. They'll get you. And that region is going to be good to see how it plays out to Sweet 16 and Elite 8 play. It's going to be a fun one. And I think the champion might come out of that region.
I have Michigan State. I think the best team in the best conference. They're the most battle-tested throughout the year. And I love Coach Izzo. He always seems to take his teams, even if they don't have the most talent, always seems to take his teams as far as possible in the NCAA tournament. Quickly, before we move on, Who's your pick again? You got Kansas?
Kentucky.
You got Kentucky.
Kentucky's going to win.
I'll take Michigan State.
Take Michigan State. Okay.
With a qualifier, Louisville as my, if it doesn't work out, pick.
Okay, fair enough.
Michigan State's my backup plan in case they win.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Okay. Well, let's switch gears now to Peyton Manning. He's agreed to a 5-year, $96 million deal with the Denver Broncos. A lot of money for a guy who sat out last year. But what's the bigger story here, Manning to Denver or Tebow heading east to play with the Jets?
I'm going to say that the bigger story here is Manning to the Broncos because
it should be.
They're giving him 5 years. Well, yeah,
Yes.
they're giving him 5 years and $96 million. Who knows if Peyton Manning has even 1 year left in that body of his? They say he's been working out, but you don't know how that neck's going to hold up once NFL players when linebackers who have bounties on them apparently come out. if bounties were still going to be on, number one on the list was going to be Peyton Manning. Coming out against, you don't know how that neck's going to hold up. And not only do you put a lot of risk and you take a big risk on Peyton Manning, but you give away your second best option in Tebow. And say what you will about Tebow, but he really made it work in Denver. And now you have really you're putting all of your eggs into one basket. Because who are they having come in as the backup quarterback in Denver? Caleb Haney. And we know how that works out. So, Elway as an administrator, as an executive in that Broncos franchise, he put on a smiling face once Tebow started winning, but he knew in the back of his mind what his real plan was, and now the Viper has shown his fangs, and he sent Tebow packing, and now he's got his guy in Peyton Manning, but I don't know if anybody else thinks that's a good idea.
To defend the Broncos a little bit quickly, is they did put in clauses in that contract. So if he does go down with that same neck injury, there are a couple outs that they can get rid of his contract and basically be freed of this money. But you mentioned putting all your eggs in one basket. Now they got rid of their second option. So, if Peyton does go down in the first season,
then what are they going to do? Because how many quarterbacks have just been locked up recently?
Absolutely.
And what kind of quarterbacks should be coming out of the draft? They don't no longer have the ability to trade up for RG3 or hope luck falls to him or anything like that. So now they had some kind of security at the quarterback position. Now they have a lot more risk.
Well, I think obviously the Manning story is pretty big. You could tell the Broncos didn't want Tim Tebow, even though, and seriously, over break I had a little bit of a neck issue. So I'm looking for my contract. Played offensive line in high school. I'm a good pulling guard if anybody needs them out there. So if you need my services, in case there's another lockout and you got to have replacement players or anything, I'm available. You can use the 96. But anyways, with Tebow, all the stuff that's coming out of it now with the backlines of the contracts and saying now he's back on the market and all that stuff, the Jets was a very interesting pick for him. But with Manning, I do say Denver has always had one of the best offensive lines, and they've had for a very long time, dating back to the Mike Shanahan days, even before that. Their offensive line has always been very good, very protective of the quarterback, very good run blocking. And that was the big thing that they have always been successful in Denver on the ground. And so Peyton Manning, I think that, you're not going to sign Peyton Manning to bring in and say, okay, here's our offense. You're bringing in Peyton Manning to say, you're going to run this well-oiled machine because you've done it for so long. So I think that's where the value comes in with Peyton Manning, too, outside of, how long is he going to play. You have him on the sideline say he's got an injury or in camp or anything, and he's incorporating the things for the guys that are coming in behind him. I think that's another benefit than having Tim Tebow be a backup quarterback to Mark Sanchez. That saga of the Jets, it's just like they're going to try and start another HBO special just on this team. And then you got Lynn and Tebow in the same city. It's just like the storylines. I think that's probably why the trade happened, But obviously Peyton Manning's a bigger storyline. Tebow now looking, who could have guessed that they're going to have another story with coming out of that one, But I'm getting tired of the Tebow mania. I never really believed in him. I don't think it's still worth the hype. The Browns need a quarterback. Maybe they could try it.
Final thing I want to talk about before we end this segment is, if you're the Broncos, didn't you have to move Tebow? I mean, you can only have it one way. You brought him into the system. You can either start him or you have to get rid of him. I mean, there would have been too much fan backlash, I feel like, if he's on the bench.
You're talking about post-Peyton signing?
Yes, correct.
Post-Peyton signing, you have to. You had to get rid of him just because of how outspoken John Elway was against him.
I agree.
You can't have Elway speaking against him and then have him on the bench, because then he gets his way. And then it gets everything in the ownership way. The coach has no command, all that kind of stuff. So once Peyton Manning's there, you had to move Tim Tebow, because then you handcuff John Fox, who's one of the best coaches in the NFL.
And Elway doesn't want to deal with the weekly radio shows asking him what is Tebow.
When's he coming back? Yeah.
I mean, I have a feeling that he was just sick of that, and he was happy to move Tebow. Nothing against Tebow. I think he's a great guy, great face
very
for the
great
NFL.
guy, very great.
But I think Elway didn't want the media hoopla around the whole situation. That's my take on that.
Well, it's going to be anyways.
Right. It is. You're right.
But now it's out of his city, and he ain't got to worry about it.
He doesn't have to worry about
It's
it.
back to Rex Ryan.
Guys, we're going to take one more final time out, but on the other side, we'll talk about the Saints' bounty punishment as well as Dwight Howard staying in Orlando. You're watching Valpo SportsNite. Stay tuned.
We're Valpo Greek Life, and we're on VU TV.
I'm Rachel Bacher, and I'm on VU TV.
We're Mock Trial, and we're on VU TV.
We're Student Alumni Association, and we're on VU TV.
We're the Acapellas. We're on VU TV.
I'm Dave Klein, and I'm on VU TV.
Back here on Valpo SportsNite, again, Mike and Matt joining me for the final segment here. The penalties for the Saints bounty scandal includes, among other things, a 1-year suspension for Coach Sean Payton and a loss of 2 second-round draft picks. Is this a fair punishment handed down from Roger Goodell?
I don't think so. I think that I don't think there was enough information about this bounty program.
Okay.
And the way that they investigated it, I trust the way the NFL went through thoroughly to see what was going on. But just the way it kind of popped up in the news, just out of the blue, and the way that they put everything together, I think that they moved really quickly to try and solve this thing. The loss of the draft picks, I don't know. I think the fine Sean Payton got of $500,000, I think was a little generous.
Well, he's losing his salary too, which is over $7 million.
I understand that. I think the salary is too far. I think the fine maybe could have been a little bit more excessive for him because of the program, because of the thing. Now, losing Sean Payton for a year, that's a big mark for New Orleans because Sean Payton's a Super Bowl winning head coach. Yeah. And it's going to be very tough to find, what do you do? Do you find a 1-year replacement?
Yeah, that's tough.
Do you find your offensive coordinator and you bring in another or your offensive coordinator move up, you bring in another guy? Because they have a new D coordinator because Williams is gone. So, that puts the Saints in a very tough situation. Plus, they're the team that's the highest against the cap. They have to re-sign Drew Brees. They just lost Robert Meacham. They lost the best guard in football. They don't have that good of a defense. It's a tough time for New Orleans, and I think the punishment, the 2-round draft picks, I think was a little too far.
I'm going to take everything, all of my other biases and slaints and complaints about Roger Goodell and just put them in a little jar off to the side.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh, because I'm about to defend Roger Goodell,
Okay.
and as much as that pains me.
It's good TV.
Yeah. We have to look at this in a macro sense. We have to zoom out and we see what's really going on here. Paying players and offering cash incentives, not just, and Mike brought this up, we were talking about it, say, hey, hit me this go-ahead home run and, I'll buy you a new car,
Right. That's way different.
You can do that. But when it's a player's well-being and health on the line, not only is that bad for that player and, that's a bad way to run as a team, but again, in the macro sense, there's a trickle-down effect. And what Roger Goodell and the NFL are trying to do is they're trying to stamp out, and this is just another prong in the attack against this, of how football is today and how necessarily overly violent it is. Because in the rules of the rule book, it's as violent enough as it needs to be. But when you have people intentionally going out specifically to cart people off the field,
right,
that's too much and that's too far. And the message needs to be sent to the pros, to college, to high school ball, to Pee Wee football, to Pop Warner football, that this has to stop. Because otherwise, in 15 years' time, what are veterans of football? What's their health going to be like? And not only that, but what is the message of the game in terms of how violent it is and how far should it go? And so therefore, yeah, it's tough on the Saints, and they got the hammer dropped on them. I don't really argue with the taking the salary away from Sean Payton, because I'm pretty sure Sean Payton knows how to live without $7 million getting put into his bank account in a year anyway. So I think he's good enough as it is just in that sense. I don't know why that's getting talked about, but they made mistakes and they have to pay for them. The commissioner sent out a letter to owners and head coaches and said, we are aware of bounty programs. If these are happening in your teams, they made the owner and the head coach sign on the dotted line and say, from now on, this is stopping. They didn't ask anyone to come forward. They said, just agree to here on after. If it ever happens again, the hammer's coming down. And every team did that, and the Saints did that. And Sean Payton, after this news broke, continued on saying that this doesn't happen. These allegations. He kept lying, and that's why he got nipped in the bud for a year. I mean, are these penalties completely disproportionate to any other penalty we've seen come down in the history of the NFL? Absolutely. But again, think about the message that they're trying to send. This mentality of not just stop the ball from getting into the end zone, but kill the other player.
Right.
Those are messages you can't send.
I don't see how you could dive into how specific the hitting was, because it's a violent game. The nature is to go out there and you want to knock down the opponent. So going into the bounty program and the investigation, they would talk to former players, and Brett Favre, who every quarterback when they gets knocked down throw their hands up in the air, but he did it more than anybody else. Goes out and he complains about it. Kurt Warner, who they said his career ended on a hit from the New Orleans Saints, came out and said it was a clean hit, an old fragile body. It happened to be in the last minute of the game of the fourth quarter. That, how specific can you get in the bounty program? How much of the investigation? That's why I said I don't think they went far enough in the investigation. They made it happen right away, because you have a guy that's been well respected around the NFL, won a couple of Super Bowls, has been an elite quarterback throughout almost his entire career. What a great story it was to get him going and get him back into the starting role for the Rams, moving on forward, saying it was a clean hit, I'm old, and my body's worn out.
Do you think it's a little bit ironic, though, that when the NFL tries to sell their product, they show the big hits, they show the big hits that maybe puts a guy in the hospital, but then they put that on TV to make people sit at home and go, I want to watch that.
I definitely think so, because and the other light of it, what they're doing as well too, is they're putting a dollar amount per hit to fines and suspensions and stuff. Where has this been before? I think they're taking a little too far. It's part of the game, yes. Okay, if it's an injury, you have to investigate the case. But how many of those times was it actual significant injury that cost a player time? Those are the type of things that they talked about in this program, and I don't think they have enough evidence to prove that's what they showed.
We got to move on. Good arguments for both of you.
Go about it all day.
All day we could.
Fired up.
The Washington Nationals, talking some a little Major League Baseball, sent down phenom Bryce Harper to AAA. Is this a good move for the Nats?
Absolutely. Bryce Harper appeared on the front cover of ESPN at age 16. And the tagline for him was that baseball's LeBron James. And to boot, so far, it's kind of come out to be true. He won the Golden Spikes Award as a JUCO player. He had 30 home runs in a shortened season. He's definitely ahead of his curve, especially ahead of his peer group. But he's still, I don't know if he's not 19 or 20 years old yet. How many times have we seen a guy come up and he's rushed into the majors? Does Washington need help at center field? Yes. Are there other avenues? What would you rather do? Go out and spend a little bit on a stopgap, bring in a trade to get somebody like, I don't know, Marlon Byrd or somebody
overpay for Jason Worth, which they did last season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or do you want to rush along, your golden goose? Because Bryce Harper is going to play some great ball for the Nationals, at least until he hits his free agency years. But up until that point, you want to season him a little bit more. I have no problem with the idea of sending him down. Mike Rizzo, the GM in Washington, is making the right move here.
Okay.
I agree. I think he's too young. You talked about rushing to the major leagues. I think he's got a maturity thing he's got to still work on.
Oh, God, yes.
Rounding the bases and yelling at the pitcher and stuff like that. You don't want that in the major leagues, because guess what's going to happen? He's going to be thrown at all the time. People are going to be out to get him, and it's only going to hurt his development. If he's going to miss time, or, you want to talk about bounties, there you go. Going in and throwing at the guy. But, I mean, that's what part of the game is, too. So I think it's the right move. I think they went a little quick with Strasburg, and did he miss the entire year or over half the year or something last year? You don't want to have the same problem with two phenoms.
Right. Kid's 19, has some growing up to do, as we mentioned, but he'll be fine either way. I think we all agree that he's going to be a stud in the major league someday.
Buy your Washington National season tickets now.
All right, guys, we got about a minute left. Let's talk about Dwight Howard. His future with the Magic seemed in severe jeopardy, but Dwight decided to exercise his option to play through the 2012-2013 season. Was this the best career move for Howard?
The thing is that with Dwight Howard is he's not, the trade talk's going to start at the end of the year when the option's picked up. The trade talk's going to start again at the trade deadline. And then if he hits free agency, or if he even gets to the trade deadline, is the other thing. Because no one's going to acquire Dwight Howard unless they sign the extension prior to. So the decision to stay Right now, I would say yes, because I think the only team that was going to take a gamble on him was the Nets. And they're 3.5 games out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
And they're 5 teams ahead of them to get to the playoffs.
And Darren Williams is looking to move
to Dallas, too. So I think that at the moment, that was the best decision, was to stay with Orlando. They have a chance, and they told them they're going to try out and go and add pieces. I don't think they did at the trade deadline. But I don't know why you're not a Bull, Dwight.
As good as that would be.
Derrick Rose and Dwight Howard, come on.
Oh, man.
Scary. I want to talk about the decision that Dwight Howard made for himself and what the message that it sends. Because in the age we are in the NBA with prima donna players, essentially anybody can decide where and how they want to play. You must trade me to this team, and you know, coming from I'm a baseball background, that just seems aberrant to me because that's just not the way things work. But Dwight Howard has the ability to say to his owners and his coaches, I get to do whatever I want, and he says, I choose you. He decides that he wants to stay. And it's a good foot. First of all, it sends a good message that in this age of free agency and big dollars, that some people still can recognize where they came from, salute their roots, and stay with one organization, which long term, that just does well for the game. It's not any good for any professional sport if you guys have moving in, moving out, playing for 5 different teams in 6 years. Talking about the long term, because this isn't like he didn't say I'm ending my career in Orlando. He said he's playing through the 13th season. What this does is it opens up a dialogue about how long does Dwight want to stay. And he's already put in some equity to where he says, I decided to stay for this year. Now you guys take care of me and you can actually keep me here and build a team around. Because the ownership, they're trying to put together a team around Dwight Howard. And if he commits, if he takes this first little step here and then keeps going along, then they can say, okay, you've decided to commit to us. We're going to commit to you. We're going to bring in the players, and we're going to get you some rings.
Good point. Mike, final word.
I want to see Dwight Howard commit to the game before I trade for him. Okay. Because since that option, they played the Nets, they won. Okay. Then they played the Bulls, they scored 59 points, and they've been struggling since. Show me that you care about the game before I commit money to you.
Fair enough. We're out of time. I want to thank Mike Targonski, General Manager at WVUR, and Matt Barnard, Business Director at WVUR. I'm Drew Taylor. I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you here next time on Valpo Sports Night.